Working security at an office building isn't as exciting as it sounds. Most nights are quiet, just cameras, hallways, and the hum of fluorescent lights that never seem to turn off. You get used to the silence. You get used to the boredom, until something happens that makes you wish for the boredom back. I worked the night shift at a 6-story office complex downtown. The building was old but well kept, the kind of place where every door echoed, and every step felt louder than it should. My routine was simple: patrol each floor once every hour, monitor the cameras, and make sure no one was inside after hours. For months, everything was normal. The strangest thing I dealt with was the occasional false alarm or a janitor forgetting his keys. Then, one night around 3 a.m., I noticed something odd on the camera feed. The elevator was moving. No one had called it. No buttons were pressed. But it was going floor to floor, stopping briefly, then continuing upward again. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. Maybe the motion sensors were acting up. But then I noticed the part that made my stomach turn. Every time the elevator doors opened, I could see the faint reflection of someone standing inside. Someone the system said wasn't there. I leaned closer to the monitor, thinking maybe I was seeing things. The grainy camera footage made it hard to tell, but every time the elevator doors opened, I could swear there was a faint outline, a figure just barely visible in the reflection of the metal walls. I switched to the other camera angles, trying to catch whoever it was leaving the elevator. But no one ever stepped out. The doors would open, sit for a few seconds, then close again and move to another floor. That didn't make sense. The building had motion sensors. The elevator only moved if someone pressed the button inside or on a floor. I radioed the other guard, Brian, who was stationed on the ground floor. He laughed it off. Probably a software glitch. You know how old these elevators are? But when I told him the elevator was now stopping on the 5th floor, the one that had been closed for renovation, he went quiet. Nobody's up there, he said. That floor's locked. Exactly. I watched as the doors slid open on camera. The lights flickered slightly, and for a split second I saw it again. A shape, a shadow that looked like someone standing just behind the reflection in the elevator wall. Tall. Still. I grabbed my flashlight and keyring and decided to check it myself. I told Brian to stay on the line. The building was silent as I made my way down the hallway toward the elevator bay. The air felt heavier, like the pressure dropped. When I got close, I pressed the call button. The elevator was already on its way down. When the doors opened, I felt an instant chill crawl up my spine. The air inside was ice cold, the kind of cold that doesn't belong in a sealed space. I stepped inside, shining my flashlight around. Empty. Then the elevator doors closed on their own. I hadn't pressed a button. I slammed the open door button, but nothing happened. The elevator jerked violently and started moving, not smoothly like usual, but in short bursts, like something was interfering with the system. I tried the emergency button, but the intercom only gave off static. The floor indicator blinked rapidly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then stopped. The doors opened onto darkness. The 5th floor. There weren't supposed to be any lights, but faint emergency bulbs glowed in the distance, just enough to see the hallway stretching ahead. Dust floated in the air. Plastic sheets hung over unfinished walls, and standing at the far end of the corridor was a figure. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, facing me. I called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here!" My voice echoed, but there was no reply. Then the elevator doors began to close on their own again, slowly, silently, and just before they shut completely, the figure took one step forward. My hand shot out to stop the doors from closing, but they sealed shut before I could reach them. I jabbed the open button again and again, but nothing happened. The lights flickered. The elevator didn't move. Then I heard it, a faint thud, like footsteps, coming closer. They echoed in the hollow silence of the 5th floor. 1, 2, 3 slow steps, each one heavier than the last. My throat tightened. I pressed the intercom again, shouting for Brian, but all I got was static. The footsteps stopped right outside the elevator doors. I held my breath, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, from the other side of the metal doors, something pressed against them, hard enough to make them bulge slightly inward. I stumbled back, heart pounding. A dull, metallic groan filled the elevator, like the doors were being forced apart. The thin gap between them widened, just enough for me to see a shape. Something dark, almost human, standing there. I didn't think. I just started hammering the door close button until my thumb went numb. The elevator finally jerked downward, the sound of the cables whining as it descended. But the relief didn't last long. The overhead lights flickered and went out completely. I was left in total darkness. Then, a faint reflection appeared in the brushed steel of the elevator wall. Behind me, a person's outline. I spun around with the flashlight. Empty? When I turned back, the reflection was closer, standing right behind where my own reflection should have been. I felt the air shift, cold against the back of my neck. Then, clear as day, a whisper. "You shouldn't have come up." The elevator slammed to a stop so hard I fell against the wall. The doors slid open on the ground floor. Brian was standing there, eyes wide. "What the hell happened?" he asked, grabbing my arm. Before I could answer, a loud ding echoed behind us. The elevator doors closed again on their own and started going back up to the 5th floor. By itself, Brian and I stood there in silence, watching the floor indicator above the elevator door light up one number at a time. 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it stopped. He asked if someone might have still been up there. I just shook my head. My voice wouldn't even come out. We waited for 10 minutes, but the elevator didn't come back down. Finally, Brian used his key card to override the system and bring it to the lobby. When the doors opened, the elevator was empty, except for one thing. In the corner, where I had dropped my flashlight earlier, there was a handprint smeared on the metal wall. Too high to be mine, too large to belong to Brian. We both quit before the week ended. A few months later, I got a call from another guard who had taken my old shift. He asked if I'd ever experienced strange elevator malfunctions. He said every few nights around 3 a.m., the elevator moves by itself. Same pattern, floor to floor, stopping on the 5th, then returning empty. He laughed nervously when he told me that sometimes, when the doors open on the 5th floor, the motion sensor picks up a shape standing inside. I didn't laugh back, because some visitors never really leave. Working security at a corporate building sounds simple until you realize how big, how empty, and how quiet those places become after midnight. I was assigned to monitor a new high-rise downtown. The upper floors were offices, the lower ones storage, and beneath it all sat a long, concrete basement used for maintenance equipment. That basement was what bothered me most. It wasn't part of the nightly patrol schedule. Cameras covered everything, so we never had to go down there unless something triggered an alert. I was perfectly fine with that. For months, the screens showed nothing unusual, just still corridors, flickering bulbs, and the occasional mouse darting past. Then, one night around 2:45 a.m., I noticed something strange. On camera 12, the feed from the basement hallway flickered, static rolling across the screen like someone had brushed against the wire. Then, for a second, it cleared, and someone was standing there. A person in the middle of the frame, back turned to the camera, motionless. No tools, no uniform, no reason to be there. I radioed my supervisor. He told me no one had clearance to be in the basement that night. When I looked back at the screen, the figure was gone. But every few minutes, the static would return, and every time it cleared, that figure was a little closer to the camera. I sat frozen in front of the monitors, my coffee growing cold on the desk beside me. The figure had vanished again, leaving only the dull hum of static. I switched between cameras, scanning the rest of the building, but everything else looked normal. Just that one feed, camera 12, kept glitching every few minutes. I radioed my partner, Tony, who was stationed at the opposite end of the lobby. "You got eyes on anyone near the basement stairwell?" He replied almost instantly. "Negative. Everything's quiet down here." I hesitated before answering. "Something's tripping the camera in the lower hall." He sighed, already irritated. "Man, it's probably a wiring issue. You know how old that system is." I wanted to agree with him. I really did. But the way the figure had appeared, it wasn't random static. The shape had been too clean, too defined. About 20 minutes later, the feed flickered again. This time, the figure was closer, standing at the intersection where the two basement corridors met. I could make out more details now. It looked like a man in dark clothing, head slightly tilted down, hands at his sides. The lighting in that area was dim, but it looked like he was facing the camera now. My stomach tightened. I leaned forward and noticed something off about his posture. His head hung too low, like his neck couldn't hold it upright. I switched on the building's PA system and spoke through the intercom, my voice echoing faintly through the basement. "This is security. You're not authorized to be down there. Please identify yourself." The figure didn't move. For a long moment, the feed remained perfectly still. Then, with a flicker of static, the figure was suddenly gone again. I exhaled shakily and checked the door log system. No recent entries or key swipes. The only way into that basement was through the stairwell Tony was guarding. I called him again, voice tight. "You sure nobody's gone through that door?" He swore he hadn't seen a thing. Before I could reply, the lights on the monitor dimmed slightly, just the basement feed. The hallway light on camera 12 flickered once, twice, then stayed off. And yet, I could still see movement. In the darkness, faint and grainy, something was moving closer to the lens. A slow, deliberate motion, like someone dragging their feet. I turned up the monitor brightness. The shape came into focus, too close now, almost filling the frame. The head was tilted to the side. The mouth was open. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Tony, I think someone's in the basement. I'm going down there." He tried to stop me, but I was already grabbing my flashlight and keycard. I needed to see it for myself, to prove it was just a trick of the camera. The stairwell door creaked open, the air thick and cold as I descended. My boots echoed with each step until I reached the bottom. The light above me flickered weakly, and halfway down the hallway, right where the camera had been pointed, my flashlight landed on fresh, wet footprints leading straight toward me. The footprints were spaced too far apart for someone walking casually. Each one looked heavy, pressed deep into the dust and grime that coated the basement floor. They led from the darkness at the far end of the hall, straight toward where I was standing, and then stopped just a few feet away. I froze. The air down there felt thick, humid, almost alive. The buzzing of the light above me faded into the background as I tried to listen. Nothing. Just my own heartbeat. "Tony," I whispered into the radio. "I think someone's down here. Call it in." Before he could respond, a sound crackled through the radio. Not Tony's voice, but a faint hiss. Then, through the static, I heard breathing. Slow, shallow, right in my ear. I jerked the radio away and looked back down the hall. The light flickered, and for the briefest second, something stood at the very edge of the darkness. A man, or what looked like one. But the proportions were wrong. The shoulders too broad, the arms too long. My flashlight flickered as I stepped back. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the concrete. The figure didn't react. It just tilted its head. That tiny, unnatural motion sent a bolt of panic through me. I raised the flashlight higher, trying to focus on its face. But the light sputtered again, and when it came back, the figure was gone. My footsteps echoed as I backed toward the stairwell door, trying to keep the beam steady. I nearly tripped when the radio came alive again. "Get out," a voice whispered through the static. I froze. That wasn't Tony's voice. Then, from the far end of the hallway, I heard the creak of metal, the same sound the basement camera made when it panned side to side. Only now, it was happening in real life. The motion detecting camera was turning toward me. The red recording light blinked, and in the monitor above the camera, I saw myself standing there, and something tall and dark behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just that same wet trail of footprints stretching back into the dark. Then the elevator upstairs dinged. The power flickered, and all the basement lights went out. The lights stayed off for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. I stood completely still, gripping the flashlight, waiting for whatever was behind me to move first. When the power finally flickered back on, the hallway was empty. The footprints were still there, but they now led away from me, back into the shadows where they had first appeared. I didn't wait to see where they ended. I bolted for the stairwell, slamming the metal door behind me. My radio crackled again as I climbed. Tony's voice finally came through. "Man, where the hell are you? I've been calling you for 5 minutes." I didn't answer right away. My voice shook when I said, "I'm done with the basement." We went back to review the footage later that morning. The cameras had recorded everything. The flickering lights, the empty hallway, my flashlight beam. But the footprints weren't there, and neither was the figure. Except for one frame. Right before the power cut out, the feed caught something standing inches behind me. A tall, black shape leaning over my shoulder. Its head tilted, as if watching the monitor too. No one believed it was real. They said it was a compression glitch, but every few nights after that, the basement camera still flickered around 2:45 a.m., even after they replaced the system. And when it clears, sometimes, you can still see that shape, standing closer to the lens than before. Working security at a construction site sounds easier than it is, especially at night. There's no light except the tower lamps, no sound but the wind through the metal scaffolding, and nowhere to run if something goes wrong. I took the night shift at a partially built apartment complex just outside the city. It was supposed to be simple. Walk the perimeter, check the gates, make sure no one was stealing equipment. My only company was a portable radio, a flashlight, and the occasional rat scurrying through the dirt. For the first few nights, it was peaceful, boring even. I'd listen to music on one earbud, walk my rounds, and count the hours until sunrise. Then, one night around 2 a.m., I started hearing it. At first it sounded like footsteps, heavy boots crunching across gravel. I assumed it was another guard or maybe a worker finishing up late. But when I called out, no one answered. The sound stopped the moment I spoke. I swept my flashlight across the open site. Half-built walls, steel beams, stacks of lumber. Nothing out of place. I shrugged it off and kept walking. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. Only this time, it was coming from the second floor of the unfinished building. And as my light moved upward, I caught a glimpse of someone standing at the edge, staring straight down at me. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The figure was standing perfectly still at the edge of the unfinished balcony, outlined by the dim yellow light of the tower lamp below. I could see just enough to tell it was a man, or at least shaped like one. "Hey!" I called out. "You can't be up there!" No response. The wind rustled through the scaffolding, making the sheets of plastic wrap flutter and snap. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. I radioed the foreman, who was technically on call even at night. He groaned when I told him what I'd seen. No one's supposed to be there. Probably some kids messing around again. Still, I wasn't convinced. I decided to check the structure myself. The second floor was nothing but metal framing and plywood flooring. My boots echoed as I climbed the temporary stairs, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. I reached the top and swept the light across the space. Nothing. No footprints, no movement, no sound. But when I turned around to head back down, I froze. A ladder that had been leaning against the wall when I came up was now lying flat on the ground, like someone had kicked it over. The sound must have come from below me, but I hadn't heard a thing. My chest tightened as I called out again, this time more cautiously. That's when I heard the clang. It came from the far end of the floor, the sound of something metallic falling over. I turned my light toward it, catching just a glimpse of movement behind a support beam. Someone was up here. I started moving closer, trying to make my voice sound steady. This site's off limits after dark. You need to leave right now. No answer. I turned the corner around the beam, shining the light straight ahead. Nothing there but an open doorway leading to a half-built stairwell. The air was colder near that side, like a draft coming from somewhere deeper inside the concrete frame. Then my radio crackled. Tony, the same guy I worked with on a different job months back. His voice came through. You all right, man? You sound winded. I pressed the button and whispered, Someone's here. Second floor. Static filled the channel. Then, faintly, a voice. But it wasn't Tony. It was lower, slower. Why are you still here? I froze. The radio went dead. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. I was completely alone, or so I thought. Then, from the dark corner of the stairwell, came a single sound that chilled me to the bone. The creak of a boot stepping on plywood, and then another, coming straight toward me. The footsteps were slow and heavy, echoing through the unfinished room. Each one made the floor vibrate just slightly beneath me. I lifted my flashlight toward the sound, my hand shaking so bad the beam jittered across the walls. Stop right there, I yelled. I'm calling the cops. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The kind of silence where you realize something is listening to you. I took a few steps backward toward the stairwell, keeping the flashlight steady on the dark corner. Then I saw movement. A figure stepped out, tall and broad, face hidden under a dirty construction helmet. You're not supposed to be here, I said again, trying to sound confident. He didn't move. He just tilted his head to one side. Slow, unnatural, like a puppet's motion. Hey, I shouted. You hear me? That's when he started walking toward me. Not running, not lunging, just walking. Slow, deliberate steps, like he had all the time in the world. I turned and bolted down the stairwell, nearly slipping on the wooden planks. Behind me, I heard the pounding of heavy boots following. Faster now. The echo bounced through the structure, making it impossible to tell how close he was. I burst out onto the ground floor, gasping for breath. My flashlight beam shook across piles of rebar and wood. The site was still empty. No workers, no security cameras. Nothing but me and the dark. Then my radio crackled again. Why are you still here? It was the same voice from before. I threw the radio on the ground and ran toward the gate. But when I reached it, my stomach dropped. The lock was hanging open. The gate creaked, moving slightly, as if someone had just gone through. Then I heard it again, the sound of boots crunching gravel, only now coming from outside the fence. I turned back toward the building. A figure stood on the second-floor balcony, right where I had seen it before. It was watching me, and for the first time, I realized something. The tower lamps around the site weren't flickering randomly. They were going out one by one, in a straight line, heading toward me. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran straight through the open gate, my boots hitting the gravel so hard, they nearly slipped out from under me. The moment I crossed the fence line, every tower lamp on the site went dark, all at once. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned back only once. The second-floor balcony was empty now. No movement, no figure. Just the skeletal frame of the unfinished building against the night sky. When I finally reached my car, I realized my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't even get the keys in the ignition. I sat there for several minutes trying to breathe, before speeding off the lot and not looking back. The next morning, I called the site manager and told him I quit. He didn't sound surprised. He just sighed and said, "You're not the first one to leave mid-shift." I asked him what he meant. He hesitated before replying, "That site used to be an old factory. A worker died there years ago, fell from the upper level during a night pour. Some of the guys say he still walks the floors. He laughed after saying it, like it was some joke meant to lighten the mood. But I could tell by the way his voice trembled that he didn't really believe it was a joke. Because every few nights since then, I still dream about that sight. The flickering lamps, the sound of boots on gravel. And when I wake up, I can still hear him ask, faintly, in the dark, "Why are you still here?"